Have you ever wondered? There are more than 15 Assassin's Creed games out right now, and even more are on the way. And this doesn't just include the main titles, but also side games like Bloodlines and Chronicles. But let's be honest for a second, not all of them deserve the spotlight, because some of them are just boring. Now, boring can mean different things to different people, but there are a few factors that almost everyone can agree on, like size, repetitive activities, and most importantly, pacing. So today we're going to rank some of the most boring Assassin's Creed games based on these criteria, and by the end, we'll crown the single most boring game that truly tests your patience. Let's start. Beginning with the first entry on the list, Assassin's Creed Unity. Now on paper, it has everything a great Assassin's Creed game needs, like a revolutionary setting, a map built to complement the mechanics, and above all, that pure assassin vibe. But instead of fully delivering the experience we all expected, and yes, it does get some things right, but it also messes up in multiple areas. First off, the story. It feels random and unstructured. The main character's motives keep shifting and the progression lacks any real sense of urgency, something we already talked about earlier in our previous videos. At the start, your core objective is completely different. The game makes it seem like you will be chasing Shay for the rest of the story because he killed your father. Even if it wasn't heavily emphasized, it clearly felt like a path the story wanted to follow. But once Arno grows up, the story takes a sharp turn, where it feels like he's not even curious about his father's death anymore. And let's be honest, if something like that happens to someone in childhood, they would at least question it, or carry some form of trauma or PTSD. But in Arno's case, it's like the entire memory just disappears. From there, the story jumps to Delasier's murder, then shifts to Arno's relationship with Elise, and eventually to him being depressed. In short, there's no clear development that keeps you hooked. Now, gameplay, I'm not gonna lie, it's fun. The parkour system and tools combined really make you feel like a stealth god. But then comes its worst side, the map. Visually, it's a 10 on 10 and absolutely beautiful. But the moment you open it, it's a completely different story. It's flooded with endless activities, cockades, locked chests, DLC chests, co-op missions, side content, and of course the main story missions. At some point, it stops feeling like you're playing a game and starts feeling like you're just ticking off a checklist. And even though it's optional, but that feeling hits the moment you see the map every single time. The main story missions are well designed, but without a strong narrative, they end up feeling shallow. Don't get me wrong, this is just my personal opinion because a lot of you probably had a great time with Unity, and some of you might even be replaying it now because of 60 FPS patch. But sometimes, gameplay alone isn't enough to carry the experience. Everything else matters too. So no, it's not boring when it comes to pure gameplay. But overall, it just isn't engaging enough. And most of the praise it gets is still mainly for its parkour. Chronologically, it comes right after Assassin's Creed Unity releasing just a year later. And honestly, it nerfed a lot of things Unity actually did right. It was also the first game where we got something like a dual protagonist system, which was pretty popular back then. Now, a lot of people didn't like it, and that's completely fair. The over-the-top gameplay and the way it handles the story sometimes make you forget that you're even playing an AC game. I mean, you cannot even wear your goddamn hood while walking. It strays far from that original formula. But to be fair, it also introduced some expanded gameplay mechanics, like carriage riding, improved gunplay, and more freedom with combat. And yeah, all of that feels great for the first 5 hours only. When the game throws those massive set pieces full of explosions and chaos, it feels fresh. You get to explore a different side of Assassin's Creed. You can capture boroughs, build your gang, and spread your influence across London. But then comes the moment of truth. After taking over the first couple of regions, something starts to feel off. That's when the repetition kicks in. The formula becomes obvious. Do a set of activities, free the area, trigger a gang war, and boom, it's yours. And almost every region follows the same loop. The game hooks you early on like a YouTube video, but stretches that hook so much that it turns into fatigue. Some story missions are even tied to completing these activities, and they're not always mandatory, but skipping them makes the experience feel incomplete. Gameplay-wise, as I said before, it's fun but in a different way. And again, as we've already established, gameplay alone isn't enough to carry the whole experience. The story tries to stay lighter in tone while still keeping some of that original AC feel, but the pacing isn't just there. At least this time we do have a clear objective, taking London back from Starrick. But even then, the story has its own issues. Starrick feels shallow as a villain because he just reacts instead of actually doing anything impactful. Overall, the side content is actually much better than the story, as a lot of it feels more mysterious and different compared to the usual loop. But even then, these issues pile up, and in some ways it ends up feeling slightly more boring than in Unity. Especially because the parkour feels stiffer, and despite the map being realistic, 90% of the time you're just swinging from one building to another. So overall, for us, and I'm sure many of you, it's an okay-ish Assassin's Creed game. But a few aspects really drag it down, especially when you consider it was originally planned to be something quite different. And if you want us to cover the cut content of Assassin's Creed games, let us know because we might dive deep into that in a future video. I'm sure most of you have forgotten about it, but it does exist. And in fact, a lot of players never even played it. Released for the PSP back in 2008, Assassin's Creed Bloodlines feels more like a direct Altair's story sequel, where we see him dealing with the Templars in Cyprus. Now, for its time and for its platform, it was actually impressive at the time. But if we only judged games based on graphics, then this list wouldn't even exist. Because when you really dissect it, the game is surprisingly shallow. The parkour is stiff, the environment feels empty, and if you're looking for that true Assassin's Creed feel, then it's just not there. There are no bustling crowds, the combat feels weak, and even the story doesn't hit as hard as it should. Now sure, you can excuse some of this because the platform, and also the time it was released. But the story, that's something they definitely could have done better. Especially when you compare it to Assassin's Creed Altair's Chronicles, which is a mobile game, and that somehow managed to leave a bigger impact. The antagonist feels weak, and overall, a lot of the game just feels a knockoff of Assassin's Creed rather than the real thing. That said, there are a few things that I really liked. The witch boss fight was memorable. The Altair and Maria storyline had its moments, and of course, just getting to see more of Altair was always a plus. But again, this is just our personal opinion. Everyone has their own take on it, because back in childhood, a lot of us probably enjoyed it, maybe because it felt new and exciting at the time. But now, it comes off as a boring experience that most players would definitely drop midway. And there's one thing I genuinely appreciate: the straight, linear story structure. Something that even Assassin's Creed 1 struggled because of its repetition. And honestly, if this game had been made for consoles, there's a chance it could have been seen in a much better light, especially considering how repetitive AC1 itself was. Now, this one's a bit different from your typical Assassin's Creed games, because it went for a 2.5D side-scroller style, which was unique, but that's also where it ran into its biggest limitation. See, when you try to run a third-person action-adventure stealth game into a side-scroller, you automatically limit a lot of what makes AC, well, AC. So, instead of giving each title in the Chronicles trilogy its own unique flair, it ended up feeling very similar across the board. The stories had potential, sure, but most of it was delivered through animated cutscenes, which, for me at least, didn't feel satisfying. Characters like Xiao Jun, Arbaz Mir, and Nikolai Orlov deserved their own proper spin-off with care and depth, but that never really happened. The gameplay itself was repetitive, stealth felt scripted and predictable, and you'd just wait for a guard to walk by and then take them out. Combat followed the same pattern every time, with nothing particularly exciting or innovative. It could have worked if they fully embraced the side-scroller format and refined the mechanics, but that's the point. They didn't, and the result was underwhelming. In the end, the games become boring, and honestly, most people, even us, pretty much forgot that they even existed. Sorry, Chronicle fans. Now, I know what some of you are thinking: how can you put the original game on this list? It started everything, and look, my guy, you're absolutely right. It deserves all the respect in the world for laying the foundation. The atmosphere was incredible, the story and the mystery of the Animus, it was groundbreaking at the time. And Altair remains one of the most iconic characters we've ever had. But let's just take off the nostalgia goggles just for a second. If you go back and play Assassin's Creed 1 today, it is painfully and undeniably repetitive. You're right, I'm talking about a gameplay loop that genuinely tests your sanity. Unlike the later games where missions feel dynamic, AC1 forces you into the exact same rigid structure every single time. You ride into a city, you climb a tower to sync the map, you save a random citizen who's getting harassed by the guards. Then you have to gather intel, and how do you do that? By doing the exact same 3 chores. You sit on a bench and eavesdrop. you follow a guy and pickpocket him, or you beat someone up in a back alley to interrogate them. Once you do enough of these chores, you finally get the green light to do the actual fun part, the assassination. And then you do it all over again, 9 separate times. And by the time you reach the 3rd or 4th target, the illusion of being a master assassin starts to fade, and it just starts feeling like a part-time job. Sure, the writing is phenomenal, and the philosophical debates between Altair and his targets are still some of the best writing in the series. But the journey to get to those moments is a massive slog. Even the open world between the cities, like the kingdom, is practically empty except for guards that instantly spot you if you ride your horse a little too fast. So yes, it is a legendary game because it gave us the hidden blade, the parkour, and the leap of faith. But from a pure gameplay perspective, it's basically a brilliant tech demo that stretches 3 hours of gameplay into a 15-hour grind. Moving on to Assassin's Creed 3. Now, the hype for this game before it launched was absolutely unreal. We were coming right off the legendary Ezio trilogy, jumping into a brand new engine and stepping into the American Revolution. On paper, it sounded like the ultimate next-generation Assassin experience, and to be fair, it did introduce some incredible things. The combat was absolutely brutal, the tomahawk animations are still some of the best in the franchise, and it gave us the very first taste of naval combat. But then there's the pacing. If we're talking about the games that truly test your patience, then AC3 might have the most notorious opening in gaming history. You boot up the game fully expecting to jump into the shoes of a badass assassin ready to parkour through the trees. But instead, you spend the first 3 to 4 hours playing as Haytham Kenway. Now, don't get me wrong, Haytham is a fantastic character, and the Templar twist at the end was brilliant, but my god, it dragged. You're forced through slow linear missions like attending operas and riding horses at a walking pace in what feels like one massive dressed up tutorial. And just when you finally get through it, thinking, alright, time for the real game, the game says nah and hits the reset button. Now you're playing as a child. You literally have to play hide and seek with the village kids, and you're learning how to hunt. You're basically doing chores. It takes almost 6 entire hours of hand-holding before Connor finally puts on the assassin robes and you get to actually explore the world on your own terms. 6 hours. And even when the world finally opens up, traversing the frontier can be an absolute slog. Yes, the snow mechanics were brilliant in 2012, but actually trudging through waist-deep snow for 5 minutes just to reach a mission marker? Not exactly thrilling gameplay. Add in the fact that Connor is incredibly stoic and serious, especially coming right after the charm and charisma of Ezio, so the story often feels heavy, slow, and a bit dry. Even though AC3 brought a lot of great innovations to the table, the agonizing slow start and the restrictive pacing makes it a massive hurdle. It's a genuinely good game hidden behind hours and hours of pure boredom. Next up, we have Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Now let me start by saying this. Visually, ancient Greece is an absolute masterpiece. It's easily one of the most stunning open worlds Ubisoft has ever created, and if you play as Cassandra, you get one of the most charismatic protagonists the franchise has seen in recent years. The abilities are flashy, the Spartan kick is incredibly satisfying, and naval combat makes a solid return. But when we talk about what makes a game boring, Odyssey practically wrote the modern playbook on map bloat and artificial grinding. Because this wasn't just an action-adventure game anymore, it went full-blown RPG. And with that came the absolute worst mechanic for pacing, like level gating. Imagine this. You're playing through the main story, things are getting really intense, and you're hunting down the cult of Cosmos, while trying to reunite your broken family, and the stakes are all-time high, and you're fully invested. And then right before the next main quest, you hit a massive wall. The game basically says, sorry, you're level 21, and this mission is level 25. If you fight these guys now, they will absorb 1,000 sword strikes to the face and instantly one-shot you. So what do you even do? You have to completely pause the epic emotional family drama to go run errands for random NPCs. You spend the next 4 hours doing generic fetch quests, like clearing out the exact same copy-pasted bandit camps, hunting 5 wild boars, and delivering a package across the ocean. It completely kills the momentum of the story. And the map, it is ocean wide, but in so many places a puddle deep. There are literally hundreds of question marks scattered across the islands, and 90% of them are just the exact same enemy forts with the exact same loot chests. So instead of feeling like a proto-assassin hiding in plain sight, you feel like you're playing a single-player MMO grinding out XP just to earn the right to see the next cutscene. So yeah, combat is fun and the world is gorgeous, but when you're forced into hours of tedious, repetitive side content just to finish the campaign, that is the definition of a boring grind, which could have been made better. Next up, the one we begged Ubisoft to make for over a decade, Assassin's Creed Shadows. Now, on paper, this was the absolute dream: feudal Japan, ninjas, and samurai. It's the setting fans had been asking for since the early days of the franchise, and to give credit where it's due, the dynamic seasons and the lighting system are absolutely breathtaking. Watching the world change from spring blossoms to heavy winter is a massive visual flex. And in Naue, her stealth gameplay is a genuine return to form. Crawling through the grass, killing the lights, using the grappling hook, it actually feels like you're playing a classic AC game again. But then we have to talk about the pacing, and where the game completely drops the ball. First, the dual protagonist system. Having two characters with completely different playstyles sounds great, but in practice, it creates a massive disconnect. When you play as Yasuke, the game turns into a heavy, clunky action brawler. He's a literal tank, and sure, smashing through armor with a kanabo is fun for the first hour, but it completely kills the momentum of being a fast and agile killer. You lumber into a camp, mash through enemies, and suddenly it feels like you're playing a completely different and much slower game. And then there's the open world itself. You'd think after the massive fatigue of the RPG era, they would have scaled things back and tightened the focus. But no, the map is still undeniably bloated, and after the first 15 hours, the honeymoon phase wears off, and reality sets in. You realize you're doing the exact same stronghold infiltrations, the same regional checklist, and chasing the exact same map markers over and over again, just with a different seasonal coat of paint. And instead of a tight, thrilling narrative about the shinobi and the samurai, the core story gets stretched incredibly thin over dozens of hours of filler content. So while finally getting to feudal Japan was a dream come true, the repetitive world design and the jarring, sluggish shifts in gameplay make large chunks of Shadows an absolute chore to get through. And finally, we reached the number one spot, the ultimate endurance test, the absolute king of boredom, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Now look, I'll be fair, the first 10 to 15 hours of Valhalla are actually pretty great. Leaving the snowy mountains of Norway, sailing to England, building up your settlement of Ravensthorpe, and raiding monasteries with your Viking crew, it's a fantastic power fantasy. But then you talk to Randvi. You open the Alliance map and the nightmare begins. Valhalla doesn't have the pacing problem. It weaponizes its own map against the player. In games like Origins or Odyssey, if you didn't want to do a side quest, you could actually skip it, or at worst, just grind a little XP to get past the level gate. Valhalla decided to fix that by taking all the side quests and turning them into mandatory main missions. This is the dreaded pledge system. Imagine this, you just play through a massive lore-heavy and mind-blowing story sequence involving Eivor, Sigurd, and Basim. You're on the edge of your seat, you want to know what happens next, but the game physically stops you. It tells you that before you can see the next chapter of the actual story, you have to go to a random county in England, meet a guy you've never seen before, and spend the next 3 to 4 hours solving his local political disputes. And you have to do this over and over and over again for nearly every single region on the map. You end up playing a 100-hour game where 60 hours of it is pure unfiltered filler. It completely destroys any sense of urgency. Like, how are you supposed to care about the fate of your brother or the Order of the Ancients when you're forced to spend 3 hours helping a random Viking? Add in the fact that the stealth system was broken at launch, the parkour feels incredibly heavy and unrewarding in the flat English countryside, and the map is littered with glowing dots that make exploration feel like a chore simulator. Valhalla isn't just boring because of its gameplay loop, it's boring because it fundamentally disrespects your time. It forces you to chew through dozens of hours of disconnected filler just to see the ending. And that is why it takes the crown as the single most boring AC experience. And that's it for today's video. Let us know what you think, and do you guys agree with our picks? Because we know some of our opinions may be controversial, but again, it's our personal opinion and we respect yours. With that being said, we'll see you in the next one. Till then, take care and goodbye.